Welcome. We're back in session with your host Jay of What's Going On, a Social Studies Network podcast. Now let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of What's Going On, a Social Studies Network podcast today with our guest,
Noelle Johnson. Woo!
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's kind of I'm kind of tired, not even gonna lie, but it's tiring being a Black woman in the PWI.
I get that.
But no, I only had 2 classes today, which was nice. I feel like I'm getting in the swing of my schedule. But also it's like these hardcore hitting English classes. You know what I don't like? People always be like, oh, you're only taking English classes, it's not that hard. Like, no. This stuff is like it's getting a little difficult.
No, it's most of getting difficult. People say that until they got to write a 15-page paper with APA sources.
Or Chicago style. What is Chicago style?
I've never done Chicago style.
I wish they would just pick one citation and make it the citation.
And it should be MLA. Because that's the easiest one to do. APA still be tripping me up. And that's all I was doing last semester was APA, and I hated it so much. I mean, I got it right, but it's still annoying because like when they be grading those citations, they be like, this not right.
I be feeling like teachers don't be grading them because I've like turned in some bad citations.
Really? My professors last year, they did. They were in one of my classes, they were heavy. They were like, look, we taking points off for these citations, so y'all better get them right. Because they're PhD students, and like we're like training y'all the way that like we're being trained to do those citations.
Yeah. I don't know if I would ever get my PhD.
I get that.
Maybe. I feel like I would have like, it would be more like a power trip type of deal. Like I want people to call me Dr. Johnson.
I get that. I mean, honestly, look, you're doing some special work going into education anyway. But tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got here, what do you do on campus, what grade you in, stuff like that.
Okay. Basic facts. I'm Noelle. I hope they can add the little woo in post. That would be funny. Anyway, my name is Noelle. I'm a junior. I am a English major with a minor in secondary education, like Jay. I'm from Chicago, also like Jay. And on campus, what do I do on campus? I'm director of cultural programs for the Alumni Union. So I get to plan a plethora of really cool, really culturally significant programs.
I love that word, plethora.
Yeah. I'm an English major, can you tell? What else? I came to U of I like on a whim. I actually didn't apply until like 3 days before the deadline because I told myself I wasn't going here.
Same.
I just thought everybody and their mama was coming here. I was like, I don't know.
They were. Yeah. And I didn't want to see them.
And now I still don't. So that was cool. But U of I offered me full ride. So I was one of the lucky people that gets to graduate college without any student loans, which is nice because I wasn't going to pay them back anyway. But yeah, I like it here. I think I've kind of found my people. Think it's nice to be on campus. And I feel like I've adapted. I'm adapting.
It was most def that money. They were like,
yeah, no, it was that money. Them refund checks.
It was like, here goes some money. And
I just don't understand why they thought it was smart to give a fresh 18-year-old $4,000 a semester my freshman year. And it just was like, yeah, use this. I was like, to do what?
I've never used any of my refund checks wisely. And I'm like, I mean, they never told us like, this is what you need to use it for. I'm like, cool, I got money in the bank. Go to Louis Vuitton, tell Louis I'm at the door, like, come open up.
I think the smartest decision I've made with my refund check. I bought a computer. I bought my MacBook. I bought my iPad. But I had to like fight my scholarship for it. And I was like, hey,
Really?
yeah, because so U of I like they do scholarship displacement.
Okay.
And because I was I Promise, all of my things have been paid for already. But my scholarship sent a paper check.
Okay.
So if I would have submitted that paper check, the only thing that I would have gotten back was I wouldn't have gotten the extra $5,000. They would have just placed my other grant.
Okay.
So I was like, hey, scholarship, I will give you back like half of this check if you let me use half of it to buy a computer because hey, I need a new computer. And they were like, we don't know about that. Let us check back. And after going back and forth, they were like, yeah, let's give that girl a computer. I was like, thank you.
Okay.
And I bought a MacBook.
So they made you give the half back though?
Yeah, but I figured it made sense
Yeah.
because there was no way I was going to be able to use it, and that money can like go to another student.
That's true. That is actually very
My back hurts.
that is very what's the word I'm looking for? Not generous. Anywho, whatever. The first
my money.
question the first question that I typically ask everyone is, what did you think social studies was when you were starting out, and what do you think social studies is now at this point in your life?
I always thought it was history. Like it was a history of people. Like to be social is to be human a little bit. Like humans are social beings. So I kind of always thought it was like the study of history.
Okay.
Like we learned about like Mesopotamia. We learned the difference between a city and a suburb, and an urban area versus a suburban area or a rural area. Like those are the kind of things that I learned in elementary school back when we were still calling it social studies, right? When I got to middle school, we started to learning about the social studies of America, like learning about like Declaration of Independence, preamble, and kind of like what things make up the history, or at least the textile history of America, the history that they have ordained to put in a book and called it knowledge, right?
Okay.
But I was blessed to go to a predominantly Black elementary school. I went to Providence English Charter School, and I can honestly say that from about 7th to 8th grade, I had a really, really nice history teacher who was a Black woman, and she kind of instilled in us that like, hey, your history may not be in these books, but just so you know, you are just as valuable to the history of America as anyone else in these books.
Definitely.
So then when I got to high school, I went to a predominantly white high school. I went to Catholic school in Chicago. It was a bit different because history then became world history, but then history also became theology class, and we were studying the Bible as a historical text. And then we just didn't have history class one year.
Oh wow. Okay.
We didn't have history class sophomore year for some reason. They just like didn't put us in history class. But then junior year I had a push. Yeah. And then I can't say anything on a push. I don't remember a thing I learned in that class. Then I had AP politics, and I had AP politics in the middle of the pandemic, so it was like, not only am I learning about history, I am currently living through historically significant moments in time.
Yeah.
Like my grandchildren, if we get them, because it's 70 degrees in February for some reason, will most likely learn about the 2020 pandemic like we learned about 9/11. Like it's going to be something that maybe they were alive for, but also like they don't really know anything about it.
Right.
Like, I don't know. History as I've grown up is always changing, because I feel like I'm at a moment in history, and I'm sure like my grandmother felt the same thing when she was my age, where I feel like I'm always living through things that are going to be in a textbook one day. Like someone's going to learn about what I experienced.
You know, I think that's really interesting about that whole lens of we're living through history right now, because that's something I'm very adamant about. Is history is not just the past, it's the present, and how it's going to therefore impact our future. And something that I always talk about with COVID is like, we never got the chance to debrief and to talk about it, and to actually like talk about the mental health that was affected by it. It was literally like, we're just going to ease you into everything,
or how
and
many
then
people
push y'all into
literally died.
Yeah.
Like people were dying, and
left
we're just
and
like,
right.
we're just glossing over that. Oh, the pandemic's over. Like it's over. Like no.
And people
like,
lost whole families.
Whole families. Like you want to know why? Like there's a shortage in workers? Maybe because 2 years ago, you wiped out like 10% of your labor, like people. Like come on now.
And that's wow, dang. That's actually like, I never thought about it like that, about like shortage of workers and things like that. I was thinking about it more from like a familial aspect, which is also very important. But when we think about the context of society, we also never talked about that, because there are probably people who went back to their job and a lot of their coworkers weren't there anymore. The people that they eat lunch with, the people that they were probably invited to their wedding, like the people who
just gone,
just not even there anymore, and no one eased us into it. Like here at school, like I don't even think we were eased into, like the first year they were very lenient with everything, like academic wise. The second year they were okay, but like once this year hit, once last semester, like
gone.
They were like, it's no more like, look, if you failed a class, we not accepting that. Like you out of here. Like if you make a mistake, like there's no more leniency. Like
it's like you don't get to make the mistakes anymore because the pandemic's over, which is like not true, because I know so many people that have recently gotten COVID.
And people
like,
are still dying too.
Yeah, people are still dying of COVID.
It's just not plastered onto the news. Like we were living in COVID, literally, like on the news every day, on CNN,
like just
MSNBC,
blasting at us, like this is how many people died today.
Every
and
day.
then it's like advertising it, or they were like going about it as if it was our fault. Like, oh, you're not in your house. You just killed someone's grandpa. I was like, what do you want me to do?
No, literally. No, because you just killed someone's grandpa. Like, no, that's literally how it felt. Like, I felt like anything that I did, I'm like, somebody's granny right now is like in danger because of my actions.
Because I decided to go check my mail
and
with the mask on, and I ordained to leave my house. And when it was like, it's not that. Like, the average human being was not responsible, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't think the average consumer, the average American citizen was like truly responsible for COVID. I think that if we would have put things in place, like some former presidents really wanted to be put in place, we could have just avoided a lot of casualties.
Definitely.
Like we prevention is better than a cure. 100%. And there's a lot of things that our government could have done to prevent a lot of the things that they are now blaming the average American citizen on.
Which is interesting too, because also I think, like, just going back to the point they made about grandchildren, I think that's going to be the only time where we actually legit get to debrief, like think about how we felt during that time, and like actually like be able to break it down in a way like, it's because we're still in it. We're still having we're still having different conversations. There's still warnings about risings of COVID cases and new variants. And so I just feel like it's going to take a long time for us to be able to heal from this point in our life and be able to actually like just actually be able to talk about it and debrief about it with other people. And I think it's interesting that it might be our grandkids, because it's always the next generation that's learning about something, making it better. So like that way the next generation after them can learn from us and do better from us. But
that's if we get grandchildren, like I said, y'all.
Yeah, no, because this weather in February is very concerning.
We're not making it past 75, bro.
I feel like, okay, if we make it to 75, you'd be like, what, 73?
if we make it to 2075, yes, I'll be 73 for a majority of
I
the
mean,
year.
that's grandparent age. You know, you'll probably maybe
Yeah.
have some grandkiddos. You know,
Yeah,
who knows?
probably.
But
My grandchildren won't have grandchildren though.
my grandchildren won't have grandchildren.
Maybe.
But speaking of the kiddos, we're currently secondary education minors and
Mhm.
English majors. How does it feel as as a Black girl navigating through being a secondary education minor and an English major?
It's strange, I will say. It's like while everybody else is like swimming through water, I feel like I'm constantly swimming through lemonade, where it's like, yeah, it was made with water, but like lemonade burned your eyes, bro. And it's like sometimes it's like, do I get to separate myself as Black girl and English major? Because sometimes it's like I can't. Like I don't really have that luxury. Like I'm taking a grammar class and all of the grammar that I've learned from schooling and all of the grammar that I've learned from being a Black woman who grew up surrounded by Black women. I was raised with my grandma, my aunt, and my mother, three incredibly strong Black women who have, yes, they can speak the most proper grammar ever, but at the same time, they have like their relaxation days. And to me, anytime my family talks is proper grammar. Like that's just what I grew up with because it's like a respect thing. Like I respect my grandmother, I respect my mom, I respect my aunt. So even when they're having like really relaxing, like they're in a relaxed tone in a relaxed area, to me that's still proper because they are my definition of proper. But then it's like I can't talk like they talk in a classroom.
Yeah.
Especially most likely being the only Black person, if not Black woman in a classroom. Like I was telling you, but I think sophomore year was the first time I had another class with a Black girl. It took me 2 years, and I do equate it to the pandemic. Like I wasn't really paying attention to race over Zoom. Which, you know, it's another thing. But like in my classes, I was like I'm the only one here, and there's like 30 of us in a classroom, and I was like, I've always had at least two other ones, at least that. And then all of a sudden it's none, and then all of a sudden it's one, and then if she wasn't in the class, it was back to zero.
Just gonna be me, or
But yeah, I think it's like swimming through lemonade while everyone else gets to swim through water. Where we're moving at the same consistency, and we're all going through we're all going through like the same thing. We're at this point, the people in my classes are going to be the people in my classes until I graduate, most likely. So it is nice to like be able to go to class and go, hey, like this reading was really hard, right? Wasn't it hard for you? Like it was so dense. It was 14 pages. But in the event that we're having a reading about like Black identities, I can't go to them and go like, oh, the reading was hard. Now the reading is hard for different reasons.
Definitely.
Because you're reading about a Black body in the sense that it is on paper. Now when I'm reading about that Black body, I'm reading about that Black body while in a Black body. And now I'm not just reading about this piece of paper. I'm reading about a very real occurrence with a very real girl. Because if I don't see legitimacy in the Black characters on my page, I'm not seeing legitimacy in myself. So all the legitimacy that I offer myself as a Black scholar and as a Black student, I'm automatically conditioned to give the same legitimacy to the reading. And that's a whole nother ballpark than what I think my non-Black classmates kind of have to go through.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about what you said, like right now we're at the point of writing literacy narratives. And so part of my literacy narrative was talking about books you know, there are books that I could relate to as certain aspects because maybe the characters are clumsy like me, or socially awkward like me, or just quirky like me, but they weren't Black. And so at some point there was a disconnect between me and that character because it was cool for them, but it was actually very uncomfortable and embarrassing for me. And so not being able to see myself and read myself in books was just kind of like very discomforting. But I also adjusted to it. Like I love those books that like even I couldn't see myself in them. But then like once I got to high school, that's when I actually got the chance to like read Black books. But the thing with that is that like the two Black books that changed my life, like Our America and Homegoing, those are read in class, but the other books were read outside of class. Those are read on my free time. And so it's just very interesting to think about the way that the curriculum influences who you are, especially like thinking about talking about language is like, if I don't see myself talking like me, acting like me, not necessarily just like me, but something that I can relate to, I feel invalidated. I feel invalidated as a student. I feel invalidated as a person. I feel invalidated in this space. And then when you look around in the classroom, you're like, oh, it's just me. Ain't nobody else in here but me. And you're talking is just so uncomfortable. And I've had to learn how to I had to learn how to love the way I speak. Because in classes, like I used to code switch at the drop of a dime.
Oh my God, yeah.
It happened naturally. Like as soon as I stepped a toe in the classroom, I'm in my mind, I don't even talk like this. You don't even say stuff like this. Like, what are you even talking about? And so like I've been going through a journey of like, talk like yourself. Because if you talk like them, they understand exactly what you said versus if you talk like you. You know exactly what I said both times I said what I said.
Yeah. In my head, it's like sometimes, especially when I was like just starting like to get the in-person classes, in my head, every single time I talked, I assumed that what my classmates would hear was just me going black, 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 black. Like all they were hearing was like the Black girl is talking.
Yes.
Like, and that was one of my biggest fears. So it was like, now I got a code switch because as soon as I kind of like start talking like this in a classroom, obviously I'm coming off as a lot softer, and obviously I'm coming off as a lot more soft-spoken. And if you're soft-spoken, that means you're hard hearing. And if you're hard hearing, you are a respectable woman.
Yes.
But if I'm going in class and I'm talking to you like this, I have a naturally monotone voice. Like that is what I grew up with. My mom has a monotone voice. My aunt has a monotone voice. My grandma has a monotone voice. And yet I still understood every word they were saying to me.
Yes.
Like, I feel like Black people, they don't have as much emotion in their voice because they show it on their face.
And in their body language.
And their body language. Like, the emotion comes out in different aspects.
Yeah.
But if no one's like looking at you when you speak, because you'll notice that a lot. Like some people just don't even give you the audacity to look at you when you speak sometimes. Yeah. And it's like, now that you're not looking at me when I speak, now you're not seeing all the other aspects of body language that are going into my words.
Definitely. No, not only did I code switch with my voice, I was code switching with my body language too. Because number one, my nails are long, and that's automatically associated with like the lesser Black woman, you know. And when I talk, you know, I'm very animated with my body. But when I was like first started to get in the classroom, which was like a bigger culture shock than being here in general, and I'm like, and you know, I just think that in this, but now I'm like, and because that's just how I talk, and I just feel like I should not have to dim myself down because I'm afraid that someone is going to think that I'm scary, or someone's going to think that I'm too Black. Like, it's so discomforting and so disheartening. And it just further adds to that dehumanization that Black girls, Black women experience on campus, especially when they're the only ones in the classroom. And like how you were talking about how, like, you know, not our non-Black peers are just reading a Black body, but we're reading a Black body within a Black body. I remember, you know, well, before I get into that, they always know the terms. They know the authors, they know the books, they know the events. And I'm like, dang, you know what? I bet you that book was dope, but I don't know who that is, and I've never heard of that book. And it's just like they're word warriors, they're vocabulary warriors, they're event warriors. But if like,
I like to call them vocabulary vulture. Because they'll cis and purr me and slay me to death. Slay queen, me to death. I'm just like,
It's always the purr.
let me say something. I love AAV. I love AAV. I will purr a woman to death.
And we
purr. But there's a time and place.
There's definitely a time.
Why are you purring me, saying purr to me after I go, like, I give you the most like surface level reading of the text.
Basic.
Like you're applauding me for the bare minimum. And when you applaud, when my classmates applaud me for the bare minimum, I think that that's the highest. I think that they think that that's the highest I can ever go in a classroom.
Yes, it's not about what they say. Sometimes it's about what they don't say. You're implying that you think that this is what I'm good at. This is what I can contribute to this conversation. There's nothing else. I remember like one time we were talking about like Black women, about how their content gets stolen and they don't get credit, how they get killed and no one talks about it. And there was just a lot of things that I was like fighting for during the pandemic. I mean, from the comfort of my room, because my family wouldn't let me out the crib. Like I forgot what an outside even like smelt like or felt like, but I was like, I was on Instagram every day, like posting news. Like people were even like DMing me like, oh my God, you post so much. Like, can you please talk to me about this? Because I was educating myself. And so all the things like that I was doing to be an activist, donating, sharing, educating other people, being educated. And we were talking about this in the classroom. After we're finally being let out of our houses, I cried in front of the class and I was so embarrassed. I hated myself for that so much.
I think that all Black women deserve to be emotional.
Yes.
Not me though. I cannot bring myself to shed a tear in front of my classmates because I have a reputation to uphold.
I get that. I totally get that.
Like, I just can't do it because when I cry, I bawl. And if I start crying, I'm not going to stop crying. And that's just not a dam that I'm willing to open in front of my classmates. But also with the pandemic, no one ever mentioned that like being Black in 2020 and going through that pandemic was different than any other race, because not only were we being in a pandemic, but also we had to like sit there and watch as Black people defended police officers for shooting and killing innocent Black people. Like the George Floyd thing, we just had to, and it wasn't even like you could like
escape it
and escape it.
It was there.
Because all you had was social media. It was all over social media. So not only were you a Black person stuck in your house, you are now a Black person stuck in your house while people are literally throwing the fact that you are Black and you deserve to be shot by a cop at your face.
No, because it was
literally can't do anything.
Yes, it was literally like, well, maybe if they listened and followed the rules. And I'm like, we've seen some cases where they were literally pleading for their life.
Exactly. Every single, and I think people need to understand this. Every single person shot dead by the police died an innocent person.
Yes.
Because you are innocent until you are proven guilty in the court of law. And guess what? They never made it to the court of law. They died innocent human beings. You cannot sit here and tell me that they deserve to be shot or they deserve to be killed because they were guilty, because legally, morally, and quite literally in your face, they were not guilty. No judge, no jury, no executioner said that those people were guilty. It was just a man with a gun. That's the end of it. Like, there's no other argument to that.
And even then, like, even if they did do something, that does not mean that they deserve to die. No one deserves, because here's the thing: we can look at school shooters and they're giving them a sandwich and a bottle of water and gently after they didn't obliterated like
literal children
population.
Exactly.
Which is crazy, and it just shows what this country thinks about us. And I know that we're both very passionate about Black people, about Black children, about being Black women, which sometimes is also a little bit nerve-wracking, because when you're in these classes, I hate to be that Black girl. Like it's just so scary. It's hard to feel safe in these spaces when people are like, here she go again talking about race, but it's like literally every single thing is about race. Why would my phone do that? Sorry.
No,
That was my grandma checking up on me like she typically does. No, but for them, it's just an event. And I always said that the only reason why everybody cared the way that they did is because no one had nowhere to go.
Yeah.
If there was life still happening, it would just be one of those things where we're going to march today and we're going to go back to our regular lives tomorrow. But everybody had to be faced with it. But even then, it was events where like, well, what about us? Why is it always the Black people who are? And I'm like, please, let's not do this. Let's not fight each other
over this.
Yes, it's like you see the same thing that I'm seeing. And it's just like that same thing when they're like, oh, we need more evidence. What more evidence do you need? There's a body cam, there's footage, there's audio. Why do we need to constantly defend that we're human beings and we deserve the same treatment as everybody else? It's just absolutely ridiculous. And when you said we never made it to court, that gave me chills. The court case that they could have had versus the court case that they had to get were absolutely two different things. Now we having to fight for the fact that they shouldn't have been killed in that inhumane way that they did versus whether they should just, like, they could have been alive. Yeah. It could have been avoided. That was someone's child.
You never know what the court would have decided. And now we'll never know what the courts decided because you decided to take it into your hands and just end their life.
And a lot of people who committed these crimes have basically got off scot-free. All they did was get fired, and they could easily go to another place, another precinct, and be a police officer again, or be a person in whatever position that they are again. But I think, like, with the passion that you have, how do you incorporate this into being a pre-service educator? Because right now we're student observing, we're in different schools, we're in different spaces, we're in different settings. So as a pre-service educator and a future educator, how do you channel that into like being a teacher and putting that into your students?
I firmly believe that we have to treat children as if they're intelligent beings.
Yes.
I think that we do a disservice to students if we sugarcoat things. And I think that kind of like going back to the subject of social studies, you have to teach them everything. You have to let them be guided not by the facts that you put in front of them, but by the facts of the entire picture. Because a history book is only going to tell you a set amount of events that have happened.
And it's what they want you to know.
The losers never get to write their own history. And come on now, like they don't get to write their own history. History is written by the victors. So the example that I always use is the BMI scale. Because the BMI scale did not take into account women of color. But now you have people going, well, if you're over a 30 BMI, you're obese. But now you have like 80% of Black women who are over a 30 and are now classified as obese, even though that scale doesn't really take into account them. So you are applying a lot of, Eurocentric methods of history, and you're attempting to apply them to everyone as a whole. And when we don't, let students know that, hey, this classification was only for the people who were deemed human at the time. And the only people deemed human at the time may have been this race or that race or this race. But which race is not being classified as human or 3/5 of a human? So it's like I have to go into these classrooms, and I really do have to treat the students as intelligent human beings. Because it's like our night class professor said the last class. He was like, those kids don't get to pick what school they're going to. They don't get to pick their parents. They don't get to pick. Some of them don't even get to pick the clothes that they got on. Like somebody else bought them clothes for them. But what they do get to pick, and what we as teachers get the amazing privilege to encourage, is they get to pick which aspects of history they are going to take into their critical thinking. And as someone who will be a teacher and who is in my student observation era, just letting them know that, hey, this history book has one part of history written in it, but this history book has a different part of history written in it. And it's up to you to use your critical thinking skills to figure out what is the truth that you're going to believe in this situation. Like, who are you going to listen to? And when the stories don't line up, which one are you going to value more than the other? And I can't tell them that information. I literally cannot tell them you need to believe group A over group B because I told you to. It's going to be up to them.
Yeah, which is something that I like talk about quite often, is that as a future Black educator, I cannot tell my Black students what they need. I cannot assume that I understand who they are and what they need because we have similar identities. At some point I understand them because I was them. I was a Black baby. I was a Black child. I was a Black teenager, and I'm a Black young adult. So at some point I have a level of sensitivity for our children, for our babies, but at the same token, I need to make sure that I'm not harming them in the way that I'm going to force what my ideologies and my experiences and project it onto them and say, this is what you need. This is who you are. And I'm going to give it to you. I want to make sure that, like, I'm an open vessel, they're an open vessel, and I'm putting into them the same way that they're putting into me. And I think that, like, that level of sensitivity that you're talking about going into these schools with is very important. And I think, like, with that, with your classes, with the classes that we're in now, how do they contribute to your experiences at the school? Like, do you feel safe? Do you feel comfortable?
I go to a pretty diverse school. And this is coming from someone who went to an all-Black school and genuinely believed that was diversity, where it was like, where it was like, we're all minorities and therefore we are all diverse minorities, but we're all the same minority. It was just a bunch of Black kids hanging out with Black kids for 9 years and then going off to high school. But it's like, excuse me, sorry.
Just get into that tomorrow.
Yeah. But it's like, I'm taking an English grammar class, right? And this is coming from someone who was like, I'm a linguist. I love learning about why certain words are the way they are. I love figuring out where a comma should go in a sentence. I was always someone who really loved language arts. And I love that they called it language arts because I thought that English language was in fact an art form. But I'm also a Black girl.
Definitely.
And not only am I a Black girl, I'm a Black girl from Chicago.
Definitely.
And not only am I a Black girl from Chicago, I'm a Black girl from the south side of Chicago who was raised by women.
For me, the east side, gotta rep the east side. just gotta put that out there.
But not only am I a Black girl raised on the south side, I'm raised by Black women raised on the west side. So language has always evolved for me. And for a really long time, I was that person that would like correct a person's pronunciation of a word. Because for the longest time, I was always told that this is how you need to pronounce this word in order to fit into society.
Yes.
Where now, as I'm going back and I'm taking English language arts again, and I'm taking descriptive English grammar, and I'm finally seeing like these credible sources written by people of color going, the way that people of color speak is just as, if not more, valid than the standard that they have been taught in a school. And the fact that you, as a person of color and as a student of color, are allowed to not only inhibit and learn about standard English, and also you're not opening up a textbook to learn AABE.
Definitely not. It's learned.
And yet you still know it, and yet you still understand it. And now I'm going into a classroom where I'm having multiple students of color who are not just Black. We have Latino, we have Asian, we have Middle Eastern students who are all using their own culturally significant forms of language. And me going, you are an intelligent human being. not only can you figure out where the comma goes, but now you're teaching me that language is completely universal, but also it's so unique and specific.
Yes.
Not only is, you know, the words that you use important to how you communicate with your family.
Yeah.
You have students whose parents don't speak English, and yet they're coming to school and speaking to me in a language that they learned at 5 years old perfectly, and they could just speak it. I understand every aspect of it, but then they're going to their their racially equivalent classmates, and now you're speaking a different language.
Yes.
So not only are you able to communicate with me, now you're able to communicate with a whole other population of the world. And that's something I can't do. I can't speak Spanish.
Right.
I'm not someone who has that ability to speak Spanish. And I'm never, ever, ever going to correct an L2 English speaker.
Yes.
Or someone who has, I'm never going to correct a polyglot on how they speak unless they ask me for it, because you're translating minimum 3 different languages at the same time. I can't even imagine what goes on in your head.
Yeah.
But now I'm like being able to take from my college classes that people are respecting these languages and these language patterns on paper and out loud and proudly. Like, people are getting grant funding to study this. They're studying language of minority cultures and culturally significant groups, and they are studying it as an art form.
As an art form, yes.
Art form. And if somebody can spend 7 years learning about this stuff and getting a doctorate degree in it, that changes your title. Like, somebody has to change their title in order to learn about this group and about how they speak. There is absolutely zero reason why me, who does not have a title, I ain't even got a degree yet, there's no way that I am not going to respect the way my students speak in my classroom.
Yes.
Somebody put time, money, effort into learning about your language as an art form. I am going to respect it as an art form. I don't care how old you are.
Yes.
You are an artist now. You're not just a student. You are an artist using an art form I know nothing about. Now I need to learn.
Yes, that is so beautiful. And it makes me think about before you got into education, what did you think about it? What did you think about being an educator versus what do you know about it now? What do you think about it now as education in itself and as an educator as yourself?
I was someone who believed in 3rd grade that I was going to be a lawyer.
Same. Yeah.
I was in the library. I was helping my librarian, and this book fell on me, and it was about Thurgood Marshall. And I was like, me and Thurgood, like this, so we best friends.
Yeah. Okay.
I did, I think, like 7 projects on that man from 3rd to 8th grade because he was amazing to me. But at the root of me wanting to be a lawyer, I just wanted to help people.
Yes.
Like, when I wanted to be a lawyer in 3rd grade, I was like, there are people going to prison and being taken away from their families for no reason. And in my head, it was like, it's because they had a bad lawyer. Like, that was the reason.
That was my reasoning too.
At 8 years old, I was like, it's not their fault, it's their lawyer's fault. And then I got to 6th grade, and I became very increasingly aware that it's not the lawyer's fault sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's literally the way that laws are set up. So then I was like, I'm gonna become a politician. And I'm gonna write the laws. And if I write the laws, y'all gonna understand the laws. And then I got to high school, and I read somewhere that the school to prison pipeline starts in 3rd grade. And I was like, I'm not waiting until they become alleged criminals for me to defend them.
Yes.
Like, I can start helping you before somebody deems you a criminal.
Yes. Yes.
And then I was like, how do I stop them? Because I was like, we got to stop this at the root. I don't want to wait until you're 27 years old and you come into my law practice, saying that you need a pro bono lawyer because you really didn't commit the crime, but the law is not on your side at this moment. I was like, what do I need to do to stop that 27-year-old from even entering my
Yes.
practice? And I was like, I want to be a teacher.
Yes.
Because a lot of my social cues, a lot of how I learned to read the world came from my teachers growing up.
Yes.
And my first teacher was my mother. First thing I ever learned how to spell was my name. And she told me that if you can sign your name, you are a person now. Because that was like a literal law. Like World War, I think it was like one. You couldn't enlist in the law unless you could sign your name.
Wow.
So people literally had to learn their like to sign their names in order to get a job. So now my mom takes that and she goes, you need to sign your name, because if you can't sign your name, you can't offer legitimacy to your status as a person. So now I'm like, okay, if my mom taught me how to write my name, then what can I do to transform what my mom was teaching me in order to teach my future students?
Yes.
So now it's like, I'm not going to teach you how to write your name, because most likely they know how to write their name by the time they come to me. I'm going to teach you how to navigate the world as a human being when the world may not be on your side sometimes.
Yes.
So yes, maybe like 20 years down the road, I'm going to go to law school and I'm going to be a doctor, or not a doctor, sorry, I'm going to be a lawyer. But before I even ordain to open up my own practice, I am going to stop them from even entering that pipeline.
Yes.
Instead of being at the end of the pipeline and saving them, why don't I just close the pipeline?
Yes. And I think like I'm very passionate about this. And when I was here, I learned about the term school to prison nexus. So it's no longer a pipeline, it's a nexus, because schools and prisons are the same thing. The carceral system and the education system, they're literally the same thing. Like, you know, when we're talking about reading, we're talking about books, it's so relevant because they're using like reading scores, they're using literacy rates for prison beds.
Yeah.
And it's like, these are our children, these are our babies, and you're treating them like animals and you're locking them up like they're a danger to society, when really society just never wanted them to be there in the first place. And I kind of had the same experience as you. I wanted to be a lawyer. I still do. I want to go into family law because I want to be able to understand the legal side of things, because for me, I feel like the more degrees I can get, the more I can help my babies. But first, I want to start off as an educator because I want to be in the room. I want to be in the room where it happens for real. A lot of people tell me like, "Oh, you should be a principal. You would be great in that leadership." I'm like, I can't touch them. I can't be with the babies.
I don't think you could be a principal until you have sat in a classroom
with those kids, talk with their families, been in their neighborhood, see what they see, like build relationships with them. Because so often our teachers are living 2 hours away. You don't go to the store that I go to. You don't see my mom or dad or my grandma every day.
I'm late to your class in the morning because you're not taking the 69 bus like I'm taking the 69 bus. I had a teacher, he was my math teacher, and he used to take the CTA like we took the CTA. So he understood why I was maybe 2 or 3 minutes late to class, because you know that green line is just, it's not as reliable as people make it seem. Like somebody could be playing with the doors and now you a minute late. But I had teachers that were like driving 45 minutes to get to my school, and it was like, why are you late to my class? Because every single commute to you is 45 minutes. There's no reason for it not to be 45 minutes. But my teacher, who was taking the CTA and who's in my neighborhood, understood that sometimes the Green Line train takes 10 minutes, but sometimes it takes 12 minutes, and sometimes it takes 15 minutes. And on a good day, it'll take 7 minutes. But they were always cognizant of, I did not have control of the Green Line. I didn't have control of public transportation. I didn't choose to go to a school 25 minutes away by bus. I don't have any control over that.
Yeah.
So you can't blame students sometimes for being late.
Yes.
And especially not being like 5 minutes late to your class, because they don't have control over a lot of that stuff.
My school is a perfect example of that. I got Noble School stories for days. If you walk in that school late, you got some options. If you come in after a certain time, that's an automatic detention. Now, sometimes like the bus was late, and I'm like, well, you need to get a note from the bus driver. What if the bus driver don't write a note?
About to sit there at the green light to write me a note. They gotta dig through their bag to find the note bag. They gotta get the pen. Then they gotta write down everything that happened. Like, no.
And then some of them just drive off on the students. So I'm like, how is that their fault? And then we also have to think about some of these teachers didn't live our lives. What if they got siblings they got to take care of, and they're the oldest ones. So now they're a student and they're a parent at the same time. So it's like I can get to the bus stop on time because my baby sibling was sick this morning. I had to make sure I take care of them, or they wouldn't get up. They took too long to get ready to get up. And it's like, this is how you can see school, the carceral system and the educational system are the same thing. Because why am I in detention for being late because the bus driver drove off on me? Or why am I being put in detention because the bus driver never showed up? How was I supposed to know that the bus driver wasn't going to show up when the bus tracker literally said it was going to be here at this time? And I was very fortunate because I got a ride every day to school and I only lived like 10 minutes away, but I understood that everybody did not have that same luxury that I had. But then even within school, right? If you were late to class, every minute that you were late, you got a demerit. But so like after 4 minutes that you were late, 4 minutes was a detention, you were automatically put in detention. And then sometime if you came late, they give you two options. You could go to in-school suspension or lunch. So basically what you're saying is
you can take socialization away.
Exactly.
Because I was 4 minutes late, so you're taking away what is most likely 30 minutes of my socialization time when I'm in this building for 8 hours a day, and you only give me 30 minutes to like eat and socialize with my peers.
Yes. And so now this criminal mindset that we're seeing now this carceral system that we're seeing now is the same system that we're seeing in our schools. We're teaching kids how to be criminals. We're teaching kids how to be guilty when you're innocent. And I think that is just very important because this is a systemic thing. It's not just I don't like you, so this is happening. This is a law that has been put in place for generation after generation that has changed over time to fit each generation, and it hasn't been much to fix it. So what are we going to do? Even though as educators, it seems like we're not doing a lot, it just takes that one educator to make or break you. Some students like absolutely hated their teachers and they hated school. And so because they hated school, because this is the only place where they could get food, or maybe the only place they could get their clothes washed, or the only place where they could have a loving or stable environment, there are teachers who are there probably looking at these Black babies and these Black children like, oh,
and being like, oh, not this kid.
Yes.
Or, oh, not this student. When it's like, maybe that student only came to school for the free lunch. And in my head, if a student is only coming to school for the free lunch, then I need to be able to adjust my schedule or adjust my teaching to take that into consideration.
Yes.
Like, this kid is coming here for the free lunch. So you know what that means? They're probably hungry. They're not going, like, who focuses when they're hungry?
No one.
Like, we don't treat the students as if we would treat ourselves. The amount of times that I would have teachers like yell at me for not tucking in my shirt, when I would look at them, I was like, your shirt's not tucked in.
Or they would eat in the classroom and we would get a detention for eating outside the cafeteria. Like, if you're hungry in class and you can eat, why can't I eat in class? Why is this a detention for me? Why are we being so bogged down? Why are we being so dehumanized and adultified to the point where you can't even identify me as the same way you would identify yourself, which is very detrimental to our kids. And then they wonder why they be dropping out of school, and they wonder why the crime rates are high, and they wonder why our babies are being killed every day, because y'all are contributing to this. Y'all are pushing them.
You're pushing them into the streets. And as a student observer, because at this point you're basically a mini teacher. Like, you have the children respect you, or at least they see you as you're an adult to them.
Yeah.
So you're basically on the same level as a teacher. Teacher probably just has a longer history of the respect from the students. But I remember being like, as a student observer, I'd be like, I'm so hungry, but I can't eat because there's no eating in the classroom. And I'm like, if they can quietly eat a Pop-Tart in that classroom, I don't have any reason to tell them they can't quietly eat that Pop-Tart. But it's like, when I say that we need to be able to treat the students with the same respect that you would treat yourself, you also have to remind students sometimes, in the gentlest way possible, that, hey, if I'm eating in the classroom quietly, that's okay. For you to eat in my classroom quietly, what's not okay is for you to bring a 4-course meal into my classroom and then wave it in front of people's faces.
if I can eat and not cause a distraction,
Mm-hmm.
I need you as a student to do the same thing.
Yes.
I am super duper duper willing to give them all the privileges that they request of me,
Mm-hmm.
as long as they just treat it right.
Yes.
And I think that a lot of teachers just don't put the expectation. They kind of just assume students know.
Mm.
Where like I've been in a student teaching position where I was like, yeah, you can eat in the classroom, like it's fine. And in my head I was like, okay, if I say they can eat, they're just gonna bring a small snack, because when I think of eat in the classroom, I think granola bar.
Yeah.
But when they hear eat in the classroom, they brought their whole lunch. And I was like, okay, I could yell at you, but also I didn't explain that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't explain that to you.
And maybe they didn't
I
eat
just
breakfast.
I literally just let your imagination run wild with that. And at that point, that's my fault. Like I should have explained that to you a little bit more. So then I have to take student out of the classroom and I go, hey, I messed up. I didn't explain
Yes.
my yes to you in the right way. Why don't you take one thing out of your lunch to hold you over until we have like recess or we have our free time, and
Mhm.
then you can take another part out of your lunch. But when I said yes, they took that as the floodgates opening,
Yeah.
while I took my yes as opening a window.
Mm.
So now you have to like learn to communicate with them,
Yes,
and
definitely.
you have to learn to be like, teachers are smart, right?
Mm-hmm.
And teachers are smart because they have experience. So you're not necessarily smarter than your student.
Yes.
You have a little bit more experience.
That's always what I say.
And
They're just
you
little
have to
humans.
take that into consideration. You have to remember that your yes is them opening up a door, but you cracking open the window.
Yes. And I think that is a perfect way to conclude this episode. But before I conclude every episode, I like to ask people to drop a gem. So maybe it could be a couple of words or something that you want people to leave this episode with.
What do I want to know? I don't know. I think what I said beforehand was that you have to remember that if you say yes, children are going to crack open the door because that's what they're going to assume.
Yes.
Like their assumptions are going to be different than your assumptions. And you have to just take that into consideration, because a lot of the times children's assumptions are based in their comfort.
Mm-hmm.
It is based in what they have known and what has been repeated to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I love this quote, and I can't remember who said it, so I'm hoping that in like the post edit, Dr. Ossoff can tell y'all with like a little boxes on my head or whatever. But a comfort place is a wonderful thing, but nothing ever grows there.
Mm.
And we can allow students to remain in comfort places, but they're not going to grow there. They're not. That's just not what's going to happen. What you need to give them is room to grow.
Yes.
And that might be a little uncomfortable to them, but it's only going to be uncomfortable until they learn to fill out that space.
Definitely. And I think that my gem is just a few things, is that number one, we have to understand that our children, our students, our babies, our teenagers, they're humans like us. The only difference is that time. We have more time to be alive. We have more time to experience. We have more time to grow up. And so we have to be able to communicate with them properly. We have to be able to compromise with them properly. And we have to be able to humanize them the way that we humanize us. We have to understand that even though we're educators, and even though we're teachers and there are students, they are still human beings. We are all in a box and we are all learning from each other in the same environment. And it is also very important to make sure that they feel that humanization from you, because it's not just about education. It's not just about teaching. It's about the love. It's about the joy. It's about the respect. It's about the peace. It's about the comfort that we offer our students, because they don't get that from outside of our classrooms. And it's up to us to do the hard work to make sure that we're filling in the gaps that society continuously eats from them and eats from them and eats from them until they cannot be fully human anymore. And now that goal of dehumanization is accomplished. So with that, thank you so much, Noelle. I very appreciate you being here. This was a very great episode. You was dropping gems the whole episode. Thank y'all for tuning in to another episode of What's Going On, a Social Studies Network podcast with your host, Jay, and we out. Peace.